right here.
Hello.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Welcome to the Freevangelic Podcast.
That's a little late. This was due last week.
It was.
We're so good at this.
But, I mean, there's a good reason for it.
It's been a crazy time.
It has been. We've got some other projects going on, but coolest thing yet.
You guys, you have to find 1C Productions on LinkedIn because the studio has been newly outfitted. It's so awesome!
So, yeah, now newly outfitted. We've got our sound insulation on the walls so we don't have sound bouncing all over the studio and back into the microphones.
Very, very exciting
It's
stuff.
very cool.
So I took a little video of it and I took pictures along the way while we were putting all of this up. So that'll all be on LinkedIn later today. Let's see, we're recording this on, what's today? March 5th. So are you going to get this episode out today?
I should be able to.
Fabulous. Then by the time you get this episode, hopefully I'll have the pics and video of the new 1C recording studio up on LinkedIn. So it's just 1C, the number 1, the letter C Productions on LinkedIn. If you haven't followed us there, follow us there, man. You're missing out on all the other shows.
This podcast is brought to you by Coliseum Counsel. Coliseum Counsel is a multifaceted law firm with offices in Naples and Crestview, Florida. Whether it's probate, guardianship, civil litigation, or criminal, let Coliseum Counsel be your one-stop shop to meet all your legal needs. Contact us today to set up a free 30-minute consultation at 239-631-8160.
So I came to Charles and I said, hey, I have a topic I'd like us to discuss on the next Freevangelic.
And that is?
Hey, well done. You just popped right in there.
Thanks. It's like I've been trained.
Right? Well, I was coming home a few days ago, and we have right outside the garage, as you well know, honey. It's a gumbo limbo? Is that how you say it?
Gumbo limbo tree.
A gumbo limbo tree. Y'all, if you don't know about these trees, do they grow anywhere but Florida? They originated from here, right?
Yeah, I don't know. And they're like sacred to the natives here, and
like they're a big to-do here, and they're my favorite tree that we have.
You can't cut them down; it's illegal.
They're awesome if you haven't seen them. We should include a pic of those, like in the show notes or something, because the way they grow, to me, they look like muscles and tendons underneath the bark. I mean, they look like human being bodies, the trunk and the limbs of them, to me. But they're continually they're called here the what are they called? The tourist tree. I think they call it the tourist tree because they're continually shedding bark and they're red in color, so it looks like they're peeling like tourists do all the time down here. So anyway, I was noticing it because the one outside of our garage was really peeling the other day, and I was like, is it supposed to do that? Is that okay? What is going on? And then when I looked it up, I found, yes, that's how it grows. It sheds its outer skin. And I was like, that's interesting because I haven't ever really thought about how many animals shed their outer skin or their outer skeleton or whatever in order to grow. And if they don't do it, they can't grow. And I was like, that's a whole lot like the process that we went through.
Absolutely.
When we were leaving what I have come to call militant evangelicalism, the kind that encourages you to storm the Capitol and things like that in the name of the chosen one.
Indeed. And, and you start looking into it, and it's really kind of amazing. Just about everything that has scales or an exoskeleton that is on land, not fish, does go through some sort of shedding process in order to grow. They simply outgrow their skin.
Well, and crazily enough, we do as well. You just don't notice yourself shedding skin all the time because you shed it in such small amounts. You're continually doing it. You're doing it while you listen to the show.
Right.
But you don't notice it because it's such small amounts continually. But, your internal growth that is happening would not have space to do that unless you were continually shedding your old skin cells and renewing them to accommodate the size that you're continuing to grow into. So I thought,
so that's why we had so much dust in our house when we cleaned this morning.
Gross. It was old skin. That's nasty. I don't want to think about that. I don't want to think about it. So I started looking up, I was like, well, what is the process when animals go through this? Is this really analogous to what we've been through in our faith? And it was just kind of shocking to me, the details of it and how very, very applicable they are to what we've been through in our faith and what we're continuing to go through in our faith as we figure out what exactly is it that we believe and that we, align our lives around. So, darling, would you like to know what I found?
Oh, yes, I would.
As I sniff at people, I'm sorry, y'all. We also, the live oaks are also shedding all kinds of pollen out there, and holy Moses. It's
and the live oaks are an interesting tree down here because they, unlike oaks up north, they are evergreen, but they go through this process just before the spring, just where they just drop all their leaves at once and immediately throw out new ones.
I told Second Born the other day, it's the sound of spring in Southwest Florida is the sound of the dry, tiny little, they're a little bit bigger than a quarter, the live oak leaves, and the sound of them skittering across parking lots, like grocery store parking lots and stuff. That is the sound of spring in Southwest Florida.
That and the sound of your daughter sniffling and snorting as she tries to work her way through the day with allergies.
Yeah, that's it. It's crazy right here. It's crazy right now. So the first thing I ran across that I wanted to ask you about, honey, is I'm on Insect Identification, I think is the name of this website that I was on. I could be wrong about that, but I think that's what it is. Anyway, one of the interesting sentences is it said, generally accomplished through the early years of the insect's existence, molting, this was one particular kind, molting, allows the body of the insect to expand under controlled and protected conditions. And I wanted to dive into that because I was like, okay, on the one hand, I was the first one between the two of us to start walking away from militant evangelicalism, and I didn't even tell you because I was so let me create a controlled and protected environment for me to figure this out. And then when I came and told you, and your reaction, which you guys can hear in episode 1 of Freevangelic, but your reaction was basically what?
Oh, it was like, okay, now what? This is all you've known. This is all you've been since you were 6 years old.
Yeah.
So what now?
So I'm trying to remember because now it's been, 3 years. Almost coming up on 3 years. Did you eventually, obviously joined me on the journey and we didn't tell anybody. I remember we still didn't tell anybody because your father was finishing his battle with Parkinson's disease at the time, and we didn't want to upset the family and start questioning faith in front of everybody right when, we're supposedly about to bury somebody and pass them into heaven. And
well, we didn't even tell the kids.
Right. We were still doing bedtime prayers.
Bedtime prayers, going to church on Sunday. I mean, we were going to a Lutheran church, not to a non-denom or a Southern Baptist or anything like that. So, I mean, in a way, we'd kind of eased away from that hardcore evangelicalism simply by changing to a Lutheran church, which is not hardcore evangelical at all.
But isn't that interesting that we instinctively, just like the insects do when they molt, created this controlled and protected environment to do this initially in? And I thought, it was completely just instinctual. What's the right word? Instinctual? Yes. It was completely instinctual of, when I first started going through it. I remember that day, when I saw that discrepancy of who told David to take the census, and I closed my Bible and pushed it away from me and said, there are discrepancies in this book, in this Bible. And I pushed it away from me, and it was just this instinctive, I'm not going to tell anybody I thought that. It's just going to be me.
Can't do that. That's against the rules.
But isn't that like a huge lost opportunity for the church? Because how different would the church be if we could then walk into Bible study or home group or whatever and say, hey guys, this is where I am. I'm thinking maybe we've got this part wrong. I mean, I just think how different could it have been for us if there was that freedom? And I know some churches, I've heard some churches allow for that freedom. I've not been a part of them, but I mean, I've been a part of, churches that have Bible studies and encourage growth and all that. So have you. But I can't imagine walking into any church that I've ever been a part of, and I've been a part of some really fabulous churches, and saying, hi, this book has issues.
Yeah. I mean, especially in that very evangelical environment, no, you can't question the Bible. But I think in my Lutheran world that I grew up in, there was a little more room to discuss, right? You could, because they were more open to, well, yes, this was written, 1,500 years ago, 1,600 years ago or more. And so let's look at this in terms of what was, there was a lot of more of embracing the historical context,
Would you have had freedom to question, like, was Jesus born of a virgin?
Oh, no, that's just a given, and you recite that every...
right, that's part of the creed.
You recite that in the creeds every Sunday.
So it's interesting to me that very characteristic of church goes against the way life was designed to work. Life is designed to include constant, continual growth.
Well, I think in the church they're fine with constant, continual growth as long as it's within the boundaries of...
Right, but the very process of things like molting shows that you don't stay within the existing boundaries when you grow. You're going to break out of those if you're going to grow, right?
True, which I guess we did.
It's against the order of things.
You must fit.
To only grow in your box, right?
You can only molt until you get to this side.
Right, and then that's it. That's as big of a bird as you're going to get. Okay, so another thing, it kept saying in everything that I was reading, in order for the insect to grow, or in order for the snake to grow, in order for the bird to grow, the crab to grow, the whatever, they can't grow unless they go through this shedding of the old skeleton or skin process. There's not going to be any growth without it because there's no room for the growth. Yeah, so that's kind of what we're hitting on here of I think there's not room for like uncontrolled growth in the church, which could be why you're seeing it die right now, because there's not there are mechanisms in place to prevent uncontrolled growth. It is only a control. You may grow in this way and this way only with these questions and these questions only, and that is it.
You stay on this path.
Yeah.
Walk here. Don't go outside the ropes.
Yeah. And so one of the other things that I read in here was how the animals start taking in air or water, depending on where they live, in order to bust out of the old skin or shell. Like they start making themselves bigger from
and fatter so that they pop the shell open.
Yeah. So they start taking in this stuff while they're still in their old skin or their old shell, which again is like instinctively what we did. We started seeking out information and taking it in, and that we started then, busting up against our old skin and old ways in ways that were more and more difficult to ignore and live within because it becomes so uncomfortable because you can't fit in it anymore because you're taking in all this new information and new understanding and enlightenment and wisdom and thoughts and ideas, which is like, again, it's in keeping with the order of life. They take in air and water and become bigger and bigger and bigger until they bust out of what the old skeleton or skin was. Now, when it's an old skeleton, they will have started growing a new skeleton inside to accommodate what they're doing, which again is what we did. We started trying to figure out what's the framework.
The new thing?
Yeah, that's why we went to what was the festival, the Wild Goose?
Wild Goose Festival, yeah.
And started asking questions because we were, trying, what is the framework that we're going to step into? What's going to be our new skeleton?
Or is there a framework, or are we going to become amoebas?
Yeah, I look about like an amoeba after the COVID-19 I've gained. My good Lord have mercy. But yeah, it's just, again, everything I read here, I was like, gosh, this is what we are going through with our faith awareness and education and growth of, we've been seeking out what is that new structure, what's the new skeleton.
Well, and I think there are a lot of people that probably go through that and then they come up upon that wall, that barrier of the skin of the church, and they go, okay, am I going to continue taking in new stuff to expand my consciousness to where I might break out past this, or am I going to shrivel up inside of it?
And here's the thing. I mean, I know this is going to be one of those ideas that it could upset some people. And so I'm sorry. I don't mean to upset you if it does. But I think that is in keeping with the way Jesus presented relationship with God. of this continual growth and understanding, with the idea that that continual expansion of growth and understanding ultimately gets you into relationship with the creator of all the growth and understanding. And so when you bump up against, as you put it, the skin of the church or the skeleton of the church, you should be able, in the Jesus version of things, to shed that and grow beyond that. Am I making sense?
You are.
Am I being too metaphorical?
No, I think you're right. I mean, we've talked about this a little bit before of, it's that if Jesus were around today, I think he'd be a little bit shocked and ashamed at what the church has become.
Gosh, yes. In a lot of instances. I mean, not all of it. There are great people doing great things.
But in terms of putting up walls between people and God.
Yeah, the exclusionary practices, the limiting beliefs, limiting factors.
If you are this kind of person, if you have this proclivity, if you have, God, we'll just don't jump right in the deep end. If you're gay, if you're lesbian, if you're transgender,
if you drink, if you
whatever.
I mean, you can eat too much, but
you can
eat.
Oh yeah, you can be a glutton. You can be a glutton, and absolutely
all you want. You can be a glutton, and you're totally fine.
You're good. But if if you consume alcohol, if you've fallen into a drug abuse,
if you suddenly don't have a ton of money,
oh yes,
yeah. If you're
finances
suddenly in debt,
and we're painting with a very broad brush. Not every single church, every single congregation is this way.
You're right, but I think the majority probably are. I'd love to hear from our listeners of their experience with the church in this regard. But, if you don't vote this way, if these aren't your political issues, if you aren't willing to march in this parade or give money to this cause, if you do give money to that cause, if you do march in that parade, there are these litmus tests instead of this giant tent of grace to say we're all at different points in growing a new skeleton or exiting an existing skeleton, and we need to let each other do that and believe that we're all ultimately trying to get to that final iteration of our being.
Well, and though you are seeing I don't know if you've been following anything, I think it's in the Methodist Church, where they're on the verge of a schism.
Really? No, I haven't been following this. What's up?
Yeah, and I've only seen the headlines. I haven't really dug into it. So if anyone wants to tell me more, please do. But the headlines I saw were basically, it looks like they are on the verge of a schism, and it's over gay rights.
Seriously?
Yes.
Oh, good grief. Just tell the ones that don't support gay rights to become Southern Baptists. They'll be fine. They're going to have to give up their alcohol too, though. So.
Yeah.
Although, weren't the Methodists the original
the Methodists
abolitionists?
They were not abolitionists. They were the
temperance.
The
temperance movement? Wow, wrong word.
Yeah, the Methodists definitely led the temperance movement, yes.
Yeah, so they can just return to their roots and be Southern Baptists now.
There you go.
They'll be just fine.
All will be well in the world.
I mean, we laugh, but again, that's that limiting stuff, right? When it's like you have to conform to this way. Because Absolutely. It's the way that I believe right now is the way. And it's like, it's no acknowledgement of, well, maybe you're just still in an old skeleton.
Oh, if you don't believe the way I believe, then you're not a Christian.
But here's the thing.
If you don't believe the way I believe, you're going straight to hell.
But, not to beat the metaphor to death, but here's the thing. If you think of them in terms of different skeletons, if I try to walk in yours, you are a 6'6" giant man. And I'm a giant woman, but I'm 5'7".
You're not a giant.
Okay, well, I've been smaller in my life, but
you're a munchkin in this house.
But I'm 5'7". If you tried to walk around in my skeleton, it would never work. You would have no idea how to live a good life in this size skeleton. Your organs wouldn't fit in it, for goodness sake.
True.
Plus your heart would be pumping blood way too hard to exist in this one. And by the same token, if I tried to jump too fast into a skeleton the size of you, then my poor heart wouldn't be able to get blood all over the place because it's just too much volume. And so it's
Are you
that
saying I'm fat?
No, I'm saying you're 6'6", and my little heart can't do that. So It would be nice to be able to reach the top of the shelves for a little while. That would be cool. But what I'm saying is, like, you can't force somebody to try to live within the size of skeleton that you are in right now. It just doesn't work. If you can think of it physically that way, think of somebody that is so physically different from you, and then think about trying to walk in their skeleton versus them walking in your skeleton. It just, I think it kind of starts showing how absurd the whole approach is of you've got to do it the way I do it.
Well, and what was it? Oh, I actually heard the other day, and it was actually from a sermon, and I wish I could remember all the details now, but it's kind of in the same thing of this, I think it was a pastor asking, hey, and this goes back to the gay rights, did Jesus hate gay people?
Well, I think, did Jesus hate people is,
and that's
pretty
where you go
obvious
to. Did
answer.
Jesus hate anybody? No. Why should the church? It shouldn't.
I don't know if the church hates gay people. I mean, I think they act like they do. I think that those behaviors are easily and understandably interpreted as hate toward gay people. I think they would tell you, no, the whole hate the sin, not the sinner. And they really don't step back to understand that when you do that, it results in the sinner feeling hated, because that is that's part of the sinner's identity. It's not like they can step out of it. It's not like I can suddenly stop being a white or a woman. And so if you say that white or woman is, the antithesis of God's plan for humanity, well, that's going to feel pretty hateful and rejecting to me, because I can't do anything about either of those things of me. They are me. You're rejecting my identity. And so I can, I'm not gay, so I can't firsthand experience what that must feel like, but that's as close as I can get to trying to understand their perspective of when people are like, oh, I love gay people, but homosexuality is an abomination. That's what the Bible says. And it's like, well, okay, the word abomination didn't appear in Scripture until I think it was the 60s.
It was like a translation thing, yeah.
Yeah. So, that's a whole other.
We've talked about translations, but I believe the Latin word was anathema. So.
It was homosexuality is the word that was not in there, not abomination. Homosexuality wasn't in there until the 60s. The word was about having sex with kids.
Oh, that's right.
It was about men having sex with little boys.
Season.
That's what the word meant.
Yeah.
And then they changed it to homosexuality, which is not the same thing.
Those are two very different things.
Not the same thing. Anyway, so something else that I ran across in my writing, in my reading, that I thought was interesting. It says, depending on the species, molting can actually occur about 5 to 60 times in the lifespan of an insect. And here was the important part that I was like, whoa, and is generally regarded as one of the most vulnerable processes that an insect can go through. Yet, it's naturally required by insects to continue to grow into a full adult stage. So I just kind of stopped at that, and I was like, okay, so, I would not wish on my worst enemy this process. It is hard.
It is hard.
And scary and difficult, and it affects all of your relationships and your certainty of who you are and what you're doing and how to live life. And I mean, I get why people avoid it.
and it is a process of shedding the old, but when you shed the old, you're very tender.
Yes.
Underneath.
And vulnerable, and people are ugly to you when they say really mean things, or at least if you're coming out of militant evangelicalism, they say mean-spirited things to you, ugly things to you. And at a time when, had they said those things to you 2 years or 3 years prior, it would have just bounced off. But because, yes, you're at this most vulnerable time in growth when you're shedding the old and haven't quite fully developed the new, it's like, I get why people are even take, a couple steps in that direction, experience that kind of pain or assault or whatever, and go, you know what, never mind, it's not worth it. I get that. I mean, I want to encourage you, if you are in that place, it's totally worth it. Like here, now that we're 2.5 years in, it's the freedom and the joy that lie in continuing on the journey vastly outweigh the pain of that period, vastly outweigh it. But I see why when somebody's in that period and the pain is coming, why they're like, never mind. I mean, just, standing by your father's bedside and watching him pass away and knowing that I'm like, the whole streets of gold, mansions in the sky situation I'm questioning and you're questioning, that was
hard.
It was crazy painful.
That was 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Wow.
So I guess it's been, let's see, we went public in 2018, right?
2019 was when we started
So I started this in 2016.
Yeah.
So it's now been 5 years.
5 years.
Almost 5 years. It was the spring, late spring when I started. And yeah, I remember that and being like, never mind. I just forget it. I want the certainty of knowing what comes next. I want to feel like I know that I know that I know absolutely what just happened the second he took his last breath. I want to know right where he is and what it looks like and what he's doing and everything for sure about it. And I don't want the pain of uncertainty. I don't want that.
Mm-hmm.
I remember that. It was like, I almost stopped the whole thing at that point. But then ultimately, your dad was such an encourager of souls. I thought, oh, that would not be honoring to him to just lay down a journey of discovery because I'm scared and it hurts.
Mm-hmm.
That's not something that would honor him and who he was.
It wouldn't, but what's interesting too, when I think back, is he was a student of Scripture and was always in Sunday morning Bible study. He was involved in church leadership, lay leadership for almost the entire life that I knew him. And the one thing I'll say is he was very comfortable
mm-hmm.
in
the box,
in the exoskeleton.
Well,
the church.
That's an interesting thing to think about. You know what? Maybe you do, and we just haven't yet. Maybe you do reach a skeleton that is the one for you in this iteration of life. And it's like, okay, I've reached the one I'm supposed to be in, and I'm going to stay in this one. I'm not sure, because there is, in this reading, they do talk about how snakes shed their skin less and less as they get older.
The older they get,
because they're not growing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so, it is in keeping with the way of life that you could, I guess, find a skeleton, that fits.
I'll give you about 40 more years. You might find that.
I think I've got a lot of skeletons between now and then.
You got a few skins.
Not just the ones in the closet either, right?
Exactly.
Y'all, I'm kidding. If you find a skeleton in my closet, bring it on out. We'll dance with it. Anyway, so I thought it was really interesting. Snakes in particular, that vulnerability. So snakes, when they're shedding their skin, and they're in that vulnerable place, they get really aggressive because they also have shed the protective covering of their eyes so they can't see as well. And so they just kind of lash out and attack anything that might be a threat, and they get really, really aggressive. And I was like, oh, yeah, step on my toes, because I think I did too. And I couldn't see the path forward, and so I didn't know if anybody approaching me was friend or foe. And yeah, I started throwing up some walls and be like, ah!
Yeah. Well, and as you grow into that new skin, that skin gets like the exoskeleton of the insect or the shrimp or the lobster or whatever. It hardens, right? I mean, you're able to take a little abuse and go, okay, I understand where they're coming from. I know, they're afraid of what I'm saying, and so they're lashing out at me or whatever it is. And so, you lose a lot of that vulnerability as time goes on.
Yeah. Well, and for me, I lost the need to defend myself, the need to, I feel like I'm being attacked and therefore I must rise up with my words and even fit, I said that and I just sat up stronger and straighter. I just don't have that as much anymore. When the attacks come and the questions and all of that about what I believe and how we live and that sort of thing, I just don't have a need anymore to convince anybody of anything or even to defend anymore. I mean, it's this deep-seated contentment with the phrase "I don't know," the phrase "I'm trying to learn," and the phrase "This is what I do know." And I just know it. It does. You can question all you want, but this is what I know, and I don't feel like I need to convince anybody that I'm right about anything. Which is a really, like, in the militantly evangelical world, the mission is to convince everybody that you're right, and they even couch it in this whole, well, if you don't do that, then you clearly don't love humanity because they're going to go to hell unless they agree with you.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's not just in Christianity; it's in look at the Mormons. Their kids have to go when they're in late teens, early 20s. They have to go out and proselytize. It's part of their mission that they have to go do.
I want us to, I want us
baked in.
I want to do a deeper dive on that whole it's called the Great Commission in Baptist circles, when we're told, go ye therefore into all the world and preach the gospel, baptizing in the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Ghost, and behold, I am with you always, even unto the end of the world, or even unto the end of the age. Oh, that's interesting. It's the end of the age, not end of the world. I wonder what age means. Maybe he was just talking to those in the immediate to spread the word. Anyway, that's the biblical basis for we must convert the world. It's why, the Crusades were fought, and it was trying to convert at the point of a sword, and it's why we burned witches and all kinds of just unholiness in the name of Jesus. But I feel like there's probably, and I have been this way my whole life, if truth is truth, then you don't have to shove somebody into it. You just have to encourage them to want to know, and they'll find it on their own. You have to encourage a spirit of seeking it out, and then just let them do what they do. They'll get there. And if they don't get where you are, then maybe you need to think about where you are.
It's interesting. I remember you and I had a conversation about this a long time ago.
Oh no, was I still in the...
This was when we were still in it.
This is not going to reflect well on me.
No, but it was really interesting because we were in, I forget which church it was. It was probably when we were going to church in Tennessee. And we were noticing that it was like the same sermons over and over again. And it was all very shallow, right? It was not deep dive. It was, and we kind of came to this realization of, well, gee, this church seems to be really good at making baby Christians.
Oh, I remember this.
Remember this conversation?
Yeah.
And it's really good at making baby Christians, bringing people into the church, getting them started down the path. But once you're down the path and you've grown,
you're done.
You're done. There's no more, there isn't depth. It was very shallow. It was very surface level.
Well, and what you're saying is it didn't have the next skeleton.
Exactly.
There was no place to step into that. You're right. I remember that conversation. But
you had people who had been in that church and others like it their entire lives.
Decades.
Their entire lives. And they just got to that surface level and they were like, I'm happy here. I know the rules.
That was what it was. I know the rules that if I follow this, I'm right.
If I do this and don't do this, I'm good, and all I got to do otherwise is bring some really good fried chicken to the potluck.
And I can feel really good about myself and really badly about the rest of those people who don't do it this way. Yeah, I remember that. Well, so there was this other phrase that I ran across in my reading. I highlighted it because I was like, that's a good way of putting it. It said, put simply, snakes shed their skin. Can we just pause for a second here?
Yes.
And talk about
for station identification.
Snakes.
Oh, no, wait.
Because in the Baptist world, snakes are evil.
Oh, yes. Symbol of the devil.
And why is that?
Uh-oh.
For reals? You're such a Lutheran. Okay. Because in Genesis, who was it?
Oh, it was the serpent that tempted Eve.
Right. And I think we've been through this in another episode where the writing of Genesis was, when you study what was happening around the community of what became the Israelites, that was directly addressing the other belief systems that were in place at the moment, many of which deified the goddess because it was from the female body that life came, and humans recognized that and glorified that. And so animals were associated with the female form, life-affirming animals like a snake that sheds its skin and continual growth and continual new life, was associated with the female, a human female, because the human female body was the one that was bringing forth life. And so when you see like the goddess sculpture that you got me.
The priestess, yeah, the priestess from Crete.
Yeah, and she's holding a snake in each hand. See, for a Baptist, that's like this instant she's evil.
Yep.
But then when you deep dive into the actual information, not the weird thing that you've been taught, but the actual, like, why is that there? Why of all creatures was there a snake in the garden? Well, because you had to immediately personify as wrong and evil and scheming and manipulative and deceptive, both female and snake, because those had been held up as sources of life.
For thousands of years.
Yes. I mean, thousands of years. You can find it in cave paintings. You can find, yes. Yeah. That was the way of worship in many, many, many places across the world. And if you're going to set up a religion that is not going to have female as its sole, or as its even primary, not sole, but primary representation of life, then
you got to get rid of snakes.
You got to get rid of snakes and female for that. I mean, you got to rob that female of wisdom.
Yeah, you got to get rid of snakes and subjugate women.
And I mean, there were also like bulls were associated with the female because they shed their horns and get new horns, and that was a sign of life. Basically, any animal, which are a lot of them, that shed its skin or its skeleton in favor of growth and new life was, we can see through the archaeological record now, was associated with females and was always a sign of life.
Well, and I remember there was something in, this was in that book, Chalice and the Blade, that we talked about last season. Yeah. I kind of want to reread that again. But there was something in there too about tools that were associated, that had religious meaning, and it was agricultural tools, had symbology, religious symbology around them, because you used them to bring forth life from the ground.
From the ground, yeah.
Whereas you got to the post-Indo-European invasion period, and it became axes and swords and shields,
tools of
and
death,
tools of death and war.
Yeah, and control and subjugation and all of that. Well, anyway, the phrase. So I got off on a tangent. ADHD, fun times, squirrels. But the phrase that I loved in here was, it said, put simply, snakes shed their skin because it doesn't fit anymore, or, get this, because it's old or worn out.
That doesn't fit.
That totally fit. It was just an old, worn out way of being. It didn't work anymore with the idea of pursuing truth in life. It was just worn out. It's just an antiquated, this doesn't work anymore. And I feel like that is so present right now in the evangelical community, these old, worn out tropes and tripes of ways of being that you just shed them. Just let them go. I'm going to sing. Let them go.
Nope. Can't do that.
Copyright. I didn't sing that. You can have 6 seconds of it.
Oh, okay.
But imagine just the freedom in really just letting that old skin go, because it's just old and worn out. It doesn't fit anymore. Just let it go. I was like,
sounds like your closet. I know what your closet has a fraction of the clothing in it used to.
That would be because of these COVID-19 I've gained.
Oh, I thought they were just old and worn out. Okay.
I mean, some of them, yeah. I'd had the clothes for 20 years. I've been toting them around since college, and it was like, this is not going to come back into style. Let it go. I think I just, a couple of months ago, got rid of my senior prom outfit. Okay, I graduated from high school 25 years ago, and I still, how many houses have I toted my senior prom outfit? Why did I do that? Other girls could have been enjoying that this whole time. So I mean,
but did you keep your pleather skirt? That's all that matters to me.
I kept the one that fits.
Oh,
I didn't keep the one from college. I let it go. I'm exactly 2 sizes larger right now than I was in college, and so yeah, I was just like, this is dumb. I need to just let somebody else, this to again go with the theme of the day. this will fit somebody else's skeleton, not mine right now. Let it go. And that too, just like everything we've been saying, it is very freeing to walk into my closet now and be like, everything in here is for me. Everything in here is an option that I can fit in, feel good in, move around in, have movement and feel like I belong in it. It is, that's, you remember that whole, what was the magic art of tidying up, or
yes.
It was the Marie Kondo thing.
Yes. Something
about tidying up, the magical something of tidying up. Anyway, I wrote the short book on it, so that's why I read it. But she talks about this this freedom and freeing and cleaning things out and tidying up. And I mean, I have completely experienced that in my closet, of only having things in my closet that serve where I am. And that doesn't mean that it only has new things in it. I mean, I have some older things in it, but they serve my need to remember, or they serve my need to honor, or I have T-shirts from my sister's old company, and of course my sister passed away last year, so one of them is too small, but I'm not ready to get rid of it because it reminds me of her and good
your
times.
Wedding dress, every woman keeps her wedding dress.
I still have my wedding dress
until her daughter needs it or something like that.
Yeah, she's probably not going to wear that exact dress, but my hope is that we can take something off of it and put it onto her dress, so she'll have a part of my wedding day at her wedding day, or maybe whoever my son marries might want something like that, her garter made out of it or something like that. So I'm not saying get rid of that. I'm saying it continues to serve in the present. That's why it's here, not because I'm hanging on, to a past that doesn't fit anymore, to a skeleton that doesn't fit anymore. Although I did manage to fit into that dress last year, that wedding dress.
You did?
I mean, I couldn't breathe, but I put it on.
Was that pre-COVID though?
That was during COVID.
Remember
we were doing a photo shoot?
Yeah. Oh, that's right.
Yeah. Our good photographer friend was like, do something crazy and walk out in the lawn and I'm going to take a picture. And I was like, all right.
I put on my tux. You put on your wedding dress. And we're out in the lawn.
Holding our breath because we can't breathe in those clothes anymore.
Nice thing about tuxedo pants, they're adjustable.
Okay, so another phrase that I ran across, and I've only got a couple more. So in another phrase that I ran across in my reading, this one was actually a quote from a guy named Donald, I'm going to mess up your last name. I think it's Michaels, Mykles. Michaels,
maybe.
Donald Michaels. He's a biologist at Colorado State University. At the time of this article, at least. He was a biologist at Colorado State University. And he said, the article's talking about molting, and he said, it's a critical event in the life cycle of an organism. And I thought, yes, it is. It's if you have a tugging and a feeling like, I feel like that tugging and that feeling, that internal tugging and feeling is how you know that your current skin and skeleton aren't going to work for the long term.
Yep.
And so you have an option of trying to continually fit yourself into it, which I will just tell you is mentally not, I don't think, going to result in joy and happiness and freedom and you being an actual productive human being on the planet.
I mean, you tried to for a while.
I did, hard, because again, it was like, I know this. This is comfortable. I don't want to question. This is a lot of work and time that I don't have. I'm running a business and I'm raising kids and, running a household and writing, and it was like, I just don't want to. I mean, it was, it was a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't want to either.
I was like, I'm comfortable in my little box over here. No, but
I don't want to question things.
Questioning. Yeah, you question too much, but ultimately we're better for it.
That's a good question to ask you. So thinking about it now, in thinking about where we are now and the way we live now versus how we lived then, do you wish that you had just figured out a way to stay in it?
No.
I don't either.
No, not at all.
But at the time I felt like, because you don't know what you're walking into, it was like, this is all I have. This is all I know. I can't let go. I mean, it was really like because not only were our personal lives wrapped up in it, my professional life was all wrapped up in it.
Your professional life is wrapped up in it too. And it's that place of comfort. And quite frankly, the church encourages you to wrap your entire life up
Not in the faith, but in that particular church.
In that church.
In that way of being.
But it's also make your entire life about Jesus.
I don't even think it's make your entire life about Jesus. I think that would result in very different life walks of believers.
Well, okay, I'm sorry.
In
make your
our way of living Christianity.
Yes.
Wrap your entire life around
In
the way
our
that we
version of
have
Jesus.
described. In our, not of Jesus, of Christianity. In our version of what it means, what constitutes being a Christian, wrap your life up in what we tell you that is. And then when you find out that it involves more than what they're saying or requiring or expecting, now you're in trouble because they don't want you to step out of that.
Right. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, I don't think that's unique to Christianity either.
I wouldn't know. I haven't been a part of those other ones. Well, I mean, peripherally, but not like to the extent that I was in militant evangelicalism. I mean, again, when you don't have freedom, when you feel like you're going to risk your standing in your church, your friendships in your church, your relationship with your pastor, your Bible study leader, your whomever, your family, because you're going to question, something is off. Something is off there. You should always, I believe, well, I don't just believe it. King Solomon wrote it. If it costs you everything, get wisdom. He said in Proverbs, chase wisdom. If it costs you everything, get wisdom. And it has cost us enormously.
It has. To
get what I believe is wisdom and an ongoing pursuit of wisdom to learn how to live well and truthfully and, in freedom. I get it costs a lot. In that moment, going back to what we were talking about, it felt like it was costing everything, all of the family, all the treasures I've stored up in heaven, all of the activity that I've done in my entire life, every pursuit I've ever gone after, everything I've ever taught my children, everything. It's like blowing it all to smithereens. That's what it felt like. Did it for you?
It did, probably to a lesser extent because I was not, my entire professional life wasn't wrapped up in it too.
Yeah, you got to keep working.
I got to keep working. That was fine. But definitely from the personal perspective, yes. I found out, I found out real quickly, who are your real friends? Who are your good friends? Who are the ones who are going to stand by you come hell or high water?
Well, and you know what? Looking at those now, it's interesting that you say that because those are the ones that I think have real faith.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones that are like, this is what I know right now, Rebecca. I don't know if it's the end thing to know, but this is what I know right now. So think about this for a little while. Or I got a lot out of this book or this resource or this human or this idea. Think on that for a little while.
And the interesting part, though, too, is we still have friends who are in ministry and are like, yeah, we understand. Okay, that's fine. We love you anyway.
Yeah, we love you in spite of yourself.
Yeah, exactly. We're praying for you.
Doesn't that feel a little like the whole they're loving the sinner and hating the sin situation?
Perhaps. But when you still even have these friends who are pastors or pastors' wives, who know exactly what we've been going through, probably been listening to our podcast, reading the blog.
Hey.
Hi, everybody. And still go, okay, that's all right. We love you. And that's the more important thing to them is you're our friend and we love you.
Well, and I feel like that's what we give back to them because from where we sit, you're the one in the dark, not us. And you're the one who's doing harm to yourself and the people around you, not us. But it's not like we're sitting over here going, you are an absolute moron. Get out of that. We're like, everybody's in a different place. You're learning, I'm learning, and we're going to give grace for that.
And I want to make clear too, we're not saying that our opinion here is, shall we say, gospel truth.
I see what you did there.
Thank you very much. I'm here till Thursday.
Oh, I love you.
Try the veal. And no, we're saying, it's that our journey has been one of exploration. And some of these friends of ours who are still very deep in the faith, who are pastors, who are...
Are you talking about deep in the evangelical faith?
Even in the evangelical faith. They've... I think some of them have said... I think probably have looked into these things themselves and said, okay, I see where you see that. That's not how I read it. That's fine.
I'm trying to figure out what evangelical friend we still have. Don't say the name out loud, just mouth it to me, because I honestly don't know who you're talking about. I can't think of any evangelical friends we still have, not by our own choice, but because they're like, you have fallen away from the faith, and he's gonna write it down for me, y'all, and tell me who he's talking about. Da, 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 da. I'm trying to figure out what evangelical friends. And you know what? Some people who listen to this who are our friends are probably like me. And I'm like, oh, you're right. They are very evangelical. Yeah, but I don't think they listen to the show.
Oh, they may not.
And honestly, if I'm being really honest about it, no, that friendship is not the same. It's a married couple, y'all, that we're friends with that are very, very still in the militantly evangelical side of Christianity. And I will say, my friendship with her, with the wife, I am very clear that she now sees me as a mission, not a friend.
Oh, really?
She's said as much to me.
Oh, wow.
You know, she's praying for me, and not in the sense of, you know, support on your journey while you try to find truth, but that you will come back into a right way. Like, you return to what I am still in.
Come back into our exoskeleton.
Yes. That's, so no, I would not count that friendship as one that, you know, has stood the test of not test, it's not really a test, but has withstood the journey that we're on. We're now their mission field.
Oh, nice. How about...
Which is fine, whatever. You know, I love that you care enough about me to pray for me. I'll take all the prayer I can get. Well, those people were never militantly evangelical to begin with.
Oh, that's true.
Themselves. See, this is interesting. He just told me about another married couple that we're friends with from our militantly evangelical days. But, I mean, if you recall, I would butt heads with him on a couple of things. And he just wouldn't have the discussion because he, at the time, was further along than me. Just because they're in a church, a Southern Baptist church, which is militantly evangelical, most of it, he, you know, how many times would he tell us that, oh, I don't agree with that part of it. I don't agree with that part of the doctrine. I don't agree with that part of it. I don't agree with this part of the sermon today. I don't agree with...
Well, that's true, because he was at the time. He's not anymore. He was a minister and was actually even within the Southern Baptist Church because he had been divorced.
Couldn't be a deacon.
He could, I mean...
He could be a minister, but he couldn't be a deacon.
He always had...
They don't call them ministers, pastors. He could be a pastor.
He had a hard time finding churches that would take him.
Right, because he was remarried.
Divorced. He was divorced or remarried.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
So, no, I wouldn't say, again, sitting here thinking about it, sadly, I don't know any true militant evangelicals that we were friends with, and we had many of them. I mean, I started a women's ministry in a Southern Baptist church, for goodness sake. We had many of them, and I could not name you one that hasn't actively shunned us, like unfriended us on social media, that I know has talked about us to other people of how awful it is and how awful we've become and all of that. The ones that we were friends with in Southern Baptist churches, like the ones you just reminded me of, they don't drink the Kool-Aid either. They're just in it.
True, and the last time we got together with him, he was happy to drink some whiskey too. So.
Well, and think about, there's another one, you know, in alignment with that friendship that, you know, that come over to our house to have a glass of wine, but we couldn't tell anybody in the church that they did.
We were never here.
I mean, think about that for a second. I so have to walk in the skeleton that is acceptable that I've got to come over to your house, drop my skeleton at the door, have a glass of wine with dinner, and then pick it back up on my way out. I mean, that's where it becomes easy for me to just not have judgment, have sadness.
You know, pity, if you will.
Pity is a strong word, but just I guess that's the right word. I'm really sad that people feel like they have to live that way.
That they walk through their daily life as, hey, I'm Mr. and Mrs. Evangelical, until we get to our friend's house, and then I can be me. We can drop the charade, be me, and then I'm going to pick it back up. Yeah. Pick up the mask again on my way out the door.
Yeah, it's like that whole joke about, you know, when there's a Southern Baptist convention in town, the liquor stores sell more, and that's a fact.
It's a fact. Yeah.
But they sell more, you know, in the dark when the sun goes down, and it's like just think about that. You have this one life here, and you want to live it in the dark. like that?
Well, I mean, do you even remember when we lived in Fulton, Kentucky? Fulton, Kentucky is one of the biggest businesses in town are the liquor stores because they're a wet county surrounded by dry counties. But when they built a liquor store across the street from Walmart, it lasted about 6 weeks before it went out of business.
Because people could be seen.
You could be seen walking into there. Your car could be seen when everybody came out of the parking lot. And so they couldn't keep it going.
I just don't want to live like that. I
Me
don't
neither.
want to have to live my real life in the dark and then do a charade when the sun comes up. First of all, I'm not a good enough liar to do that. Like, I can't keep up with what I am supposed to be, so I'm not a good enough actor. It's not a liar. I guess it is a liar because it's your real life, but like, I'm not an actress, and so I think I would be bad at it. I know I would be uncomfortable at it because I tried to continue to be the good Southern Baptist wife, the Proverbs 31 woman as interpreted by the Southern Baptist Church, even while I was going through my initial walkout in 2016. And it was just the most anxiety-producing experience of I'm walking out of my house, let me put my smile on and my pearls and my pumps and look like the Proverbs 31 woman and be industrious and have my children rise up and call me blessed and all of that stuff. It was just, it was so, you can read, I think I put some of my entries from my Questioning Faith journal that I kept when I was walking out. I think I wrote about, I went to lunch with a pastor who was a supporter of the nonprofit that I was a head of. And, he didn't have a clue where I was. And he's telling me this story about how his son had stayed home from school that day sick. And, he smelled something and went in his son's room. I'm trying to remember the story. I may be getting a little bit of it wrong, but the gist of it was there was a smell, and he went in his son's room. Or they discovered that the iPad had been underneath the pillow and had caught fire. And his framing of this story was how fabulous it was that God had ordered it that his son would be home and discover that so the house wouldn't burn down and people wouldn't be hurt. And my reaction was, that's great that your kid didn't get hurt and your house is still standing. But my reaction as someone whose house has burned to the ground is when I was a little, it burned when I was a baby, and then the top half of it burned again when I was in elementary school. And then my sister's house burned down after she got married and moved out. And my brother's house burned in North Carolina. And
kind of glad the place we live in now has a fire suppression system.
I'm just like, as someone who, has experienced loss in life, all I could think about when this pastor, he's a pastor, is telling me this is like, would you have still been like, thank God if your son had gotten burned? Or if no one had been, no, he would have thanked God if no one had been home and the house had burned down. He'd have thanked God that no one was home to be hurt. What if the boy was in bed with the iPad at the time that this was going on? That's how he smelled it. So what I was thinking was, what if the bed had caught fire and it caught your kid on fire? And God forbid, it killed your kid. Would you have still been like, how glorious of God that he kept my kid home from school that day? Or would you have spent the rest of your life wishing you had sent your kid to school even though he was sick? Why do we attribute all the good to God, but none of the bad? That was another, question I got asked when I was going through this with a very close couple of friends that I shared it with eventually. And one of them, a friend of mine up in Nashville, was like, have you noticed we never hold God accountable for all the people dying of starvation? And no, that's our fault. That's humans' fault. But if they get saved from starvation, even though it was human hands that brought them food, it was somehow God that saved them. Anyway, in sitting there with that, I brought that up because when I was out to lunch with that pastor that day, he started the lunch by having a prayer. He wanted to say the blessing as normal. And I bowed my head and felt so fake because I was just like, I'm not having a communion with the God that you're sitting there talking to right now. And you think I am. And so it felt like lying by omission. And that's why eventually I, started Freevangelic and did that post, which you were like, okay, it's driving you bonkers. Just like make an announcement and tell everybody and be done with it. And I was like, all right, let's do it.
True. So what you're saying is it's all my fault.
Yes, this is all your fault.
Okay.
Life, the universe, everything. It's all you, baby.
I am now past 42, so I'm sorry.
Okay, so I just wanted to say just a couple more things. I know we're getting long here.
I've been looking at the picture of the grasshopper, wondering where we're getting with
Okay,
that
so
one,
the crab we've been on a little bit. The crab is one of those that, it creates its new shell inside, and then it starts sucking in a bunch of water so it can grow bigger, and then that pops off the old shell. And of course, it's very, very vulnerable in the beginning because the new shell hasn't hardened, and so it's things that we've talked about so far. But one of the things that I thought interesting about its process is it says the crab fully exits its old shell, but it leaves behind its esophagus, stomach lining, and part of its intestine in the old shell. It must regrow these parts. And I thought, how metaphorically true is that? It feels like you're leaving your guts behind, or it did for me.
Yeah.
It was like, that's the innards of me are over there, and I got to go over here and grow new ones. And it's excruciating. I don't know if the crab is in pain when doing it, but for me, it was painful to figure out what the new guts of me were going to be. I don't know if, they're new. I mean, what the new ones are that you're going to grow. And so that to me I was like, yep, that's a part of the process. Yep, that right there. You leave behind your guts and got to figure it out. So,
wow.
Oh, and the other thing, the crab goes into hiding until its new shell hardens because it's vulnerable.
Because it's so vulnerable.
Yeah, which again, instinctively is what we did. Okay, final one. Yeah, you've been looking at the grasshopper this whole time. Are you ready?
Because he looks cool, kind of hanging out next to his old exoskeleton.
Okay, so grasshoppers, they only do this about 5 to 6 times in their year-long life. Okay, you ready? Mm-hmm. But here's the part that I was highlighting because I was like, interesting. Okay, when it's time to molt, this is from... I don't know, what website is this? I'm sorry, I'm not attributing. Hang on, I'll find it. No, I won't. It's not in here. I'm sorry, I'm not attributing. Sugarfoot. I don't know where I got it from. Oh, The Magic of Molting, published October? That's not a month, is it? October 16th, 2017. At math.scholastic.com.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
You like Scholastic.
Okay, I love Scholastic. Okay, so it says, when it's time to molt, a grasshopper's body produces hormones that signal, and this was the part I liked, it can no longer support its increasing mass. So you're growing larger. You physically can't, as a grasshopper, stay in your old skeleton because it can't hold you up anymore. It can't support you. And man, that felt like what I lived through and what we lived through together in our marriage of we can't stay, even in that skeleton of our marriage, it doesn't support our relationship anymore. And then he's another one that he starts growing the new exoskeleton inside the old one and then busts out and it expands and he gets bigger. And the way that he does it is he starts gulping in as much air as possible to make his body bigger so he'll bust out of the old skin. But then here's the thing. It says, once the new shell is ready, the insect gulps in as much air as possible and breaks out of its old shell. Then, and this I love this process because then, okay, so it's busted out.
So it's cracked open its shell.
It's got its new skeleton. Then it quickly attaches its muscles and nerves to the new shell. In this state, they are easy prey for predators, so they molt as quickly as possible, often in a few minutes. And I thought, again, with feeling like you're leaving your guts behind, I had this, scrambling around. When I finally decided to release the old way, it was like scrambling around trying to find what to grab onto, like the grasshopper's grabbing its muscles and everything and attaching it to the new frame. It was like, what's the new frame and what are the things that are going to make the new frame work, and let's attach them really, really, really fast because it feels really, really vulnerable and dangerous to be in this I don't know place.
You gotta have that. Yeah, you're soft. You're vulnerable, and that was true. I mean, I remember we did scramble around for a little while, and it was like I remember the first Easter.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And we're like, gee, let's examine the roots of Easter, just to try and find something to attach our calendar to.
What was it? I learned something. It's now been almost 2 weeks ago that I was going to tell you about for Easter this year. I'll have to look that up for the next episode because it was about the egg. And I can't remember what it was now, but it was the egg, actually, the egg and the bunny. Obviously are both representations of life, but they both, because they're representations of life, they too were associated with the female.
Mm-hmm. And they were holdovers from the Roman celebrations of the period.
Right.
Yeah.
And then I saw yesterday somebody had put, I think it was on Facebook or in some gift catalog or something, it said, silly rabbit, Easter is for Jesus. And I was like, this is a person who doesn't know that it's about the renewal of life. That's the theme of Easter, is the renewal of life. And bunnies are representations of that because, hello, they give birth so fast. And eggs, obviously. Oh, I remember what it was. The egg is associated with the female because that's what our bodies look like when we have new life growing inside. So that's why they started molding eggs to represent life and those being worship objects because they represented the womb of a woman. Talk about a pro-life representation.
Well, and you think about it, an egg is basically a womb external to the bird.
Yeah, and yet here you have, again, militant evangelicals, where you can't drink Starbucks because they won't say Merry Christmas and all that mess. And it's like they're pushing hard against bunnies and eggs, and these
no more Cadbury eggs in the church.
Right? Huh? It's like, we're not going to hunt Easter eggs at church this year because that's a pagan ritual. Well, I mean, it is, in that it's a symbol that was associated with the goddess of life, because that's where life comes from. But to me, it's like you're having an argument with the creator. The creator's the one that set it up for the female body to usher in life. If you don't like that, your argument is not with paganism or secularism or females. Your argument is with the one that designed it that way. And if you're having an entire holiday about overcoming death and renewal of life, it seems to me you'd probably want to have eggs and bunnies involved. Those are representations of life, of the continual renewal of life. And I don't know why including those things takes anything away from what you believe Jesus did.
Well, it's funny. I remember my church that I grew up in, we had this thing somebody had made for Christmas, and it was, it's stuck in the ground outside the door to the church. And it was an egg that had that they had cut the little, crack in, right? And it was hinged, it was all painted. And they opened it up, and here's a cross inside the egg. And I was like, really?
A cross inside
Here's
the
a
egg?
cross. You open it up, and here's the cross of Jesus
so
inside the egg.
I'm
like, so we're putting an ancient method of torturous execution inside of an egg that represents... We're going to take this
symbol of life, and we are going to imbue it with a weapon of death. That sounds about like humanity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, babe. I don't mean to laugh, but it's like sometimes we get it so wrong. It's like, that's just absurd.
Yeah, it was, looking back, at the time it was, oh, yay, because Jesus is why we're, for Easter, and he's alive, and right. But looking back now, you look back and it's like, hey, the snake who can see better because his old skin is off his eyes.
Oh, that's a biblical concept too.
Yeah, the scales have fallen from... That's what it means. Yeah, when the scales have fallen from your eyes, you see things differently.
But your scales can't fall from your eyes unless you first shed your old skin.
Got to shed your old skin.
Oh, that's a whole thing right there.
There's another hour show right there.
No, but I mean, think about that for a second. The biblical concept of the scales falling from your eyes so that you can see Jesus and see the truth that he was trying to communicate. Now recognize that you can't do that unless you shed the old skin and grow. And I don't think that means, you shed your sinful way or whatever. I think it means you shed the way that didn't let you see it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have to grow beyond.
Yeah.
You've got to grow past the ability of your skin to hold you.
And there's probably something to be said for if you don't see it yet, you've still got more skins coming.
And sorry. I'm sure as we continue the growth
Stick
process,
with us. We'll find them.
Yeah, we may have a few other layers of skin we still have to shed, or some exoskeletons.
I feel like we do. I mean, there's still so many things we don't know and are trying to figure out, which I love. I mean, I've learned to live in the joy of discovery. Mm-hmm. In that whole, I don't know about that yet. Let me go find out, or let me have a discussion or research or whatever. And there's like this peace in I don't have it all figured out. And I love that. It's okay.
I mean, even look at the simple things you've been doing, like learning about the medicinal qualities of various plants.
Which, that was a funny word because they're called green witches that do that. Yeah, I've got a new book called Plant Witchery, and it's about the medicinal uses and nutritional uses of plants. And I mean, there's nothing like anti-Christian about that concept and that idea of you're on this earth and it's full of these things, and let's use these things for good life to help ourselves and help others, and to nurture and bring forth and encourage life, protect life. These are all pro-life ideas. We should probably do those things. Yeah, that, and what was the one that you got me for Christmas? The Green Witch Handbook or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
And it, too, is about getting more in touch with the natural life, the plant life around you, and actually acknowledging it and figuring out what it is and what it does and how it operates. And all of that to me just opens you up more to life. Mm-hmm. And I feel like in life, really, in the being of life, I don't know of a better way to put that right now, but in the being of life, I feel like is where that cradle of wisdom is. Mm-hmm. And it's just continually trying to get to that kernel of living. Not to get too deep. Anyway, that's what I found out about mold. All from the, I'm hitting my papers, all from the gumbo limbo tree outside the garage.
Thank you, Gumbo Limbo.
Yay! If you guys haven't seen one, I'm telling you, you should go online and see it. It's amazeballs.
The sacred tree of the natives of Florida.
Is it the sacred tree?
It is a sacred tree. You are not allowed to cut them down.
I could see why. You should see them. They're otherworldly looking. They really look like humans stuck in the ground. They really do to me. Yeah. Like they look like strong men, strong women, like Amazon women or strong superpower men that are stuck in the ground and growing. That's what they look like to me. Really tan ones. Anyway.
Like your husband.
Yes. Like my husband in that big skeleton I couldn't walk around in. Thank you guys for listening. We'll talk to you next time. Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Freevangelic Podcast, part of the 1C Productions podcast network. You can find out more about 1C Productions and all of our shows at just1c.com. That's JUSTONEC.com.